Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to give it a couple of seconds whilst people join. My name is Gillian Askew. I am your host for today from Go for Growth. We'll get started really shortly. Oh, crikey, I'm a bit trigger happy with my screen. One sec. There we go. My mouse was a bit overzealous. Cool, we've got lots of people joining. So we will get started because we are running this session for 45 minutes today. There is a lot to try and cover. So let's crack on. So welcome, everybody. My name is Gillian Askew. I'm one of 3 co-founders of Go for Growth, and I am your host for today. I'm joined by my colleague, Lauren, from Go for Growth. Hi, Lauren.
Hello.
Morning. So Lauren will keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A function today. So if you would like to say hi and introduce yourself, please do so in the chat function. You might just want to check if you are saying hi to everybody or just to hosts and panelists and set it to who you'd like to say hello to. We will be using the Q&A function throughout. So if you have got any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A and Lauren will keep an eye on both for us. The session is being recorded today, and a copy of that recording and the slide deck will be sent out to all registered attendees, usually within 48 hours of the session. So please don't feel like you have to take lots of notes unless you want to. You will get everything that we talk through. We'll be covering today in the next sort of 35 minutes-ish, the 4 things that you can see on screen. So what do you need to have in your toolkit as a small business? How will the new regulations help small businesses and voluntary sector organisations? How do you stand out in a crowd? We've pulled together some do's and don'ts that public sector commissioners have talked to us about. And we'll talk a little bit about what the public sector offer is and what's in there that you can tap into. So we'll crack straight on. And I won't dwell a huge amount on this because I think you all being here today is probably a good signal of your interest in working with the public sector, but there are some good reminders about why the public sector is a good potential customer for smaller organisations. And I think the 3 key elements are really the size and stability of the market. It's nearly 300 billion public spend every year. And there is almost certainly something for everybody in the public sector. There has been, over the last few years, a mounting drive and ambition to place more business with smaller organisations, and that includes micro and sole traders. And what you'll see is the term SME is sort of evolving into MSME, which includes micro, small and medium enterprises. And that's to really reflect that there is a volume of organisations in that small business sector. So 5.5 million businesses in the UK, 99.3 of them would be classified as small, and that's 0 to 49 employees. That's the definition of a small business. So there's lots of drive to do more of that, and we'll talk about how the regulations are helping that shortly. But I don't know if you're aware of some of the stuff that's already going on. So I was in London last week talking to the London Anchor Institution Network, and 1.75 billion pounds worth of contracts in London has gone to micro, small and diverse owned business. So there really is a push to make this a tangible deliverable for the public sector. And that really mirrors what the government is expecting, what anchor institutions are trying to do. And that's all about local economic development, things like the levelling up agenda and widening participation, all mean that it could be a really great time to work within the public sector. There are some things that will always stand you in good stead when you're trying to compete in what can often be a crowded marketplace. So we've talked about case studies in the Promoting Your Organisation webinar before. They are a real opportunity to showcase your business in the way that you want to. They can be written or video. So Go for Growth, we use both documented case studies, but also video case studies. They're often asked for in competition processes, and they're a good way of showcasing what you do, but as viewed by others. So it's not necessarily your voice, it's someone else's voice. That could be a supplier. So for us, we have case studies that are by providers that we're supporting, but also our customers who are investing and funding us as well. So we tell the story through different lenses. You'll see on screen that number 1 is underlined, and that's because there's a link there to an example of some of our case studies. So if you want to have a look at those, please do feel free. That will go to our website, and that might just give you an idea. We did a poll probably about 18 months ago now, where we asked a couple of hundred businesses if they had case studies in their toolkit, and 70% said they didn't. So this is an area where we think actually you could do something that's in your control that can really help you stand out from the crowd. 2 and 3 go a bit hand in hand, to be fair. So knowing your customer and the locality in which they serve, if they are something like an NHS trust or a local government, for example, a local authority, they will be an anchor institution. And an anchor really is someone that's rooted in place. So somebody that's interested in the local geographical boundary that's around them. It can be super helpful to know what's important to them. What are they trying to achieve strategically and operationally? And then to think about where you fit into that. How can your business or your voluntary sector organisation help or enable what organisations that you want to work for are trying to achieve? And on number 4, on visibility, it will come up a little bit in the do's and don'ts that we talk about, but social media definitely can be your friend. And it's not necessarily a natural space for all of us, but you can join conversations with your potential customer. You can post about what you're doing in response to their media posts. So lots of public sector organisations are really active in terms of what they're doing on social media, talking about what's important to them. And so you can join that conversation on social media as well, and let them know what you're doing and start those conversations. And that can be really useful. They might also put events on that would be useful for you to attend. And there are a number of ways that you can try and make your business visible through those events by starting a conversation or joining those events, meet the buyer type events. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a second. One thing I did want to ask, and if you can pop it in the chat for me, the answer to this, we are considering whether we should run a separate webinar on social media and marketing for small businesses. And if that's something that you would welcome or would be useful for you, if you want to pop in the chat yes or no, or you can let us know in the post-event survey, that would be really helpful. If it is something that you want to do, we'll definitely put something on this year around it. And number 5 is talking about being informed. Knowledge is often power. So there is something called the National Procurement Policy Statement. And I'm not recommending that everybody go and read the National Procurement Policy Statement, but in there is some information around the guidance that the government gives to public sector organisations in terms of what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. And for example, it says in the National Procurement Policy Statement that public sector organisations should be looking to publish a pipeline 18 months in advance, 5 years out if possible. And they also have to publish a contracts register. And that means there is information that's out there to let you know what a contracting authority is spending their money on, and when they're spending it on, and who they're spending it with. So you can become informed, you can become an informed provider around what that pipeline looks like and how you can prepare for those opportunities that come up. I will talk about the new regulations in terms of pipeline visibility. So there is something called the Central Digital Platform that the new regulations will put in place, hopefully from October. The regs will kick in October. Hopefully the Central Digital Platform will be in place from October as well. Currently, if you're looking for pipeline, contract register, spend information, you would need to go to an individual contracting authority's website. In the future, that will all be in one place in the Central Digital Platform. So it will improve in terms of where we can go and get the data. It does feel a little bit like we still need some more information on whether every contracting authority will publish 18 months worth of pipeline opportunities on the Central Digital Platform and at what value they will be publishing at. So some organisations are only publishing above 2 million at the minute. Some organisations are publishing down to £500. And there's lots of variability. So we do need to see over the next few months what the guidance looks like in terms of what will be in that central digital platform, and especially for pipelines and contract registers. At 6 and 7, social value and carbon net zero, super hot topics at the minute. Providers talk to us a lot about social value. If you're a voluntary sector organisation, your entire reason for existing might be to deliver a social impact. And actually, that can become quite challenging when you're trying to write your narrative in the context of a competition that is looking for not just what you're doing now, but what more you will do in the context of that contract going forward, the additionality, if you like. And so in social value, what we tend to see is lots of organisations really get social value and are making lots of social contribution, where the challenge is how to represent that really well in terms of a competition. And it's done in different ways across the public sector. So lots of organisations will be using the TOMs, the themes, outcomes and measures, and lots of organisations won't. So social value it's a hot ticket item. Usually we'll have a minimum of around 10% in a bid, but that could be as high as 20%. So it could be in the future that bids are won and lost on the social impact that you're creating. And we are seeing a little bit of that already. Carbon net zero is becoming more widely asked for. So the current legislation says that you have to have a carbon reduction plan if the contract is over 5 million. But what we are seeing is that in lots of contracts, contracting authorities, regardless of the value, are asking providers to have a carbon reduction plan. And so if they ask for it, you need to be able to provide it. We can help you with that, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. And number 8 is really crucial. And we had, when our pre-event survey went out, we did have a number of people talking about bid skills. And understanding the competition process is super helpful to our ability to be able to navigate it. It's not a fail-safe, but it's certainly helpful. We have got some common pitfalls to explore a bit later, but knowledge of that competition process is key. So we ran 4 lunch and learn sessions last March. We're running 4 lunch and learn sessions again this March. So we start on the 6th of March. I'll tell you more about them shortly. And then we've got a half-day workshop on bid skills. And there's lots of guidance on bid skills on our video tutorials on our YouTube channel. And we have some online courses that will be coming out on bid skills as well. So how will the new regs help smaller organisations across any sector? And there are a number of things. Firstly, there is a drive not just to consider small to medium enterprises, although that is a big change, but also to consider the barriers that SMEs might face in competition and how those barriers can be removed. So the execution of that will become clearer the closer we get to October, and it might differ between public sector bodies, but it's a real positive that that's there. And some of the tangible things that you might see is, if you're asked for specific licenses, accreditation or insurances, for example, you won't have to have them in place for point of bid, but only to be able to commit to having them at point of contract success. So if you are successfully awarded a contract, it would be at that point that you would be expected to have those insurances, accreditations, licenses, whatever it is, rather than at point of bid. And that is to try and remove a barrier to entry for smaller organisations where it might be prohibitively time-consuming or prohibitively costly for someone to get those things without the reassurance that the business is coming through to fund that. The Public Services Act of 2012, it was assented to law in 2013, Social Value Act. It's not new news, but it is growing in traction. So there will be more and more emphasis placed on the social impact. And it links a little bit to MEET versus MAT. So for those that don't know what MEET and MAT is, MEET stands for Most Economically Advantageous Tender, and MAT stands for Most Advantageous Tender. And really what that's trying to do is give a clear message to procurers and commissioners that value doesn't always have to mean cost, as in cheapest. Value is subjective, And it will be clear in any competition how scores will be awarded, but it's a positive shift to buyers that it doesn't need to be a fastest race to the bottom on price. So that shift is already happening, and the Public Services Act is helping to shift so that buyers are looking at the wider value of a procurement in terms of the impact that can be made. But it is growing in traction, so it's definitely an area that businesses probably would want to focus on. We've talked about pipelines a little bit. There is a shift for contracting authorities. It's really good. It does come with that complexity that I talked about in terms of right now you would need to go to additional everyone's individual websites. The central digital platform will take care of that. But as part of that removing barriers to access, there is a real drive to undertake good quality pre-market engagement. And what we see in Go for Growth is that pre-market engagement can be transformational for providers because it gives an opportunity to understand and potentially even influence what's being procured. So those kind of pre-market engagement mechanisms are really useful, and our advice would be if you can take part, you should, and they'll come in different formats. So there might be something called an RFI, which is a request for information. That would come out via a portal, a procurement portal. And what happens in an RFI is the contracting authority says we're thinking about buying this in this way. What does that look and feel like? What do you have to offer? How might that come together? And so this specification is then developed with some of that market capability and capacity information in mind. It could be that it's a Meet the Buyer event or some sort of virtual or in-person presentation or whatever it might be to give you information and an opportunity to potentially ask questions and even influence what's going on. And you will find out about those things through Contracts Finder. There are notices, a pre-market engagement notification to let providers know what's happening. If you're not familiar with Contracts Finder and how to use it, Lauren, who is on our call, is our portal guru. So if you want some help ever navigating Contracts Finder or even find a tender service, then please do get in touch with Lauren and she'll definitely help you. So standing out from the crowd, we've talked about some of this already in terms of what's in your toolkit, but there are some pointers around competition answering in here, which could be helpful. I'm not going to read every single bullet point out, but I will just pick out a few. So for example, and I know this personally as a bidder, responding to an opportunity takes time and resources. It is probably reasonable to try and plan for those things to make sure that you have got sufficient time and resources to put the bid together. The clock ticks from day one in a competition, and every documentation set will have the key dates in there. So you'll have the opportunity to ask questions about an opportunity. Our advice is always do that early. Those clarification question window opportunity will shut. So make sure you know when you need to be doing certain things. The case studies that we've talked about are just a great evidential record of what you do. They can be really helpful in showcasing who you are and how you fit into the requirements that the contracting authority is trying to achieve. And we did have a question in the pre-webinar survey around how can you put specifics together in terms of understanding what an organisation might want. And the question was looking at healthcare specifically. So we think about in the NHS, for example, what sustainability or social contribution or net zero requirements the particular trust or ICB, ICS might want. So for NHS England, for example, for emissions that they can influence, the NHS carbon footprint, they want to achieve net zero by 2045. And there's an ambition to achieve 80% reduction by 2036 to 2039. So what you might be able to do as an organisation is think about how you can enable that. How can you be a part of delivering that? How can you contribute that? And how can you tell them what you're doing that will be useful to them in terms of helping them to achieve that particular target or goal? And every organisation will have the equivalent of those things. That's just one example for an HSE. In terms of the don't then, and they to a little bit are, sort of the antonym of, the previous things on the do's. However, there are some things on here that I think are really important. In any competition, and this will differ potentially to grant applications, but in a competition, even if you've got a relationship with a customer, so you might well be the incumbent and you're bidding to retain a contract, even if they know you well, just remember that you can only ever be scored on what you put in the opportunity response, how you answer the question. So evaluators under the regulations can only judge you on what's in front of them in relationship to the specification and the evaluation criteria. So scores don't get looked at across multiple bidders until after all the scoring has been done. So the process of evaluation doesn't compare one answer with another. It only compares the answer with the question, the specification, and the scoring criteria. There's some things in there that probably sound really obvious, like don't overpromise, don't change the formats of documents, don't use acronyms, lingo, or jargon, but they're often found in bid responses, and especially when there's a word count, you might not want to spell out your acronym and use more of your word count, but it might not be a subject matter expert that's evaluating your response, and they're not going to go and do a search for what an acronym means. So don't assume that they will know. You must spell things out. You must make sure that whoever is reading that bid response can understand the story that you're trying to tell them and the journey that you're trying to tell them on. If there is an opportunity to learn from previous feedback from previous procurements, it's never nice if you're unsuccessful in a process, but there is a learning opportunity in there. So don't ignore the opportunity to continuously improve. Use that feedback, and Go for Growth is here to go through that feedback with you if you want to, but it can often be a really useful way to help you develop and enhance your opportunity for future. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Public Sector Supplier Ready accreditation. Excuse me, one sec. So we have been asked a lot by providers about how they can show prospective customers that they're ready as an organisation to do business with the public sector. We get the same amount of providers saying to us, actually, I might not know what I don't know. So I am not sure that I know where to start. I don't know what I have got versus I don't know what I haven't got. So in response to that, we have developed something called the Public Sector Supplier Ready accreditation. And it's in 3 simple stages. There are no fees involved, and there is no time pressure on it. It helps any provider at any stage in your journey to understand what you need in your toolkit and how to best get prepared to take part in growth opportunities in the public sector going forward. There's lots of embedded help and resources. So if you do find a gap, so if you don't have case studies, for example, there'll be lots of help and resources in the Public Sector Supplier Ready accreditation to help you put together those case studies. If you don't have a policy that is definitely going to be requested in public sector, there's likely to be a template in there that will help you. And once you do graduate the accreditation, you get a certificate, you get the logo that's shown on screen, lots of social media banners and lots of promotion. And it's a way of you showing your customer that you've invested in your skill set in being able to take part in these opportunities. We have also, or we're just going through putting the Public Sector Supplier Ready accreditation through CPD, which is Continued Professional Development. So hopefully from the end of March-ish time, you will also be able to get 12 CPD hours when you go through the Public Sector Supplier Ready accreditation. And continued professional development is often asked about in social value. And so in doing the PSSR, you will be able to say, and it's part of our commitment to continue professional development as an organisation as well. So if it is something that you think you need help with in terms of how can I differentiate myself, how can I make sure that I'm ready, then do have a look at the Public Sector Supplier Ready accreditation. There'll be a link on a later slide for you to have a look at. And we've talked a little bit about carbon net zero as well, haven't we? And carbon reduction planning, having a carbon reduction plan. Businesses talk to us in different ways about carbon reduction as they do to social value. So in social value, it's not necessarily, I don't know how to do it, I don't know where to start. It's more about, actually, I'm doing lots of stuff. How do I make that count in a competitive process or a grant application? Carbon reduction can often be different. Often that can be, actually, I don't know where to start. What can I do that is relevant, proportionate, but also in line with our business aspirations? What can I do that makes sense to my business and will add value to my business, and also help me to stand out? And so Go for Growth can help you with that. So we have developed a carbon reduction planning program. The URL will be on one of the final slides for you. It's developed in line with government guidance, so it can be government compliant. Again, lots of help and resources, just 3 stages. Again, it will look at scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. So it will cover everything for you. Again, there are no fees involved for you, so it's free for you to go through and create your own carbon reduction plan. And it's a way of showing your customer that you're invested, prepared, and committed to helping to reduce carbon. But the key for us is that it is proportionate and relevant to your business. So you will be doing activities that make sense to you and to your organization and to your long-term growth. It's not a one size fits all. We've got to do something that doesn't make any sense. So if you're interested in putting together a carbon reduction plan, I'll point out the URL for you when we get there. So some common pitfalls in bids then. We asked 10 public sector organisations what they thought the top things were that providers can sometimes fall foul of. And I've been in procurement for nearly 30 years. I've written procurements that have gone out to the market, and I've been a micro business owner and social enterprise owner for the last 11 years. So I've done lots of bidding at the other side of the equation into the public sector. And no matter how good we are and how much we do of it, we can all fall foul of some of these things. So forgive me if some of them look really obvious, but it's probably worth just pointing some of them out. I think there is a real skill in answering quality questions and technical questions in a bid. Often there is a word count or a page count. We'll talk about that in a second, but effectively answering that question is really important. Sometimes, and I've definitely fallen foul of this myself, where I've really wanted to tell the contracting authority something, but it's not been what they've asked me. And I've had to really hold myself back to not tell them something that wasn't in the question because I just think it's important. Our job in a bid situation is to answer the question to the best of our ability. We run in the bid skills training that we do a whole section on answering quality questions. So I think that will be on the 13th of March or around that time. You can find it on our website, but where we break down quality questions and look at how we can understand the mechanics of a question in relationship to the specification and the evaluation criteria. But I've seen lots of bids where the question has been repeated in the answer and then the answer has come, and we're just using a word count if we do that, and it doesn't answer the question, it just tells the question again. So let's not do that. We should submit all the documentation required. So if you're asked for an implementation plan or a risk register or something like that, then make sure that you have uploaded it. If you're submitting documentation that hasn't been requested, make sure that additional documents are allowed, and make sure that they are either inside or outside of a word or a page count. So double check what you're doing with documentation. Caveating came up quite a lot from the public sector, and it's really difficult and challenging for evaluators to deal with caveats. So if this situation happens, it will be this cost. If this situation happens, it will be that cost. If you think you might have to caveat something, and there are occasions where caveats are perfectly reasonable, but on the whole, if you think you might have to caveat something, potentially you should be asking a clarification question to make clear what the situation would be and how to price it. One of the first things that we always advise in any opportunity when you're considering whether you're going to go for it or not would be the specification match. So it's a very personal thing that we do, but we take the specification, we read through it, and we tick off the bits of the specification that we can do and that's in our toolkit. We highlight any potential gaps that we might have, and we make note of any questions that are arising out of the specification that we want to ask very early on. And from that, that gives us the ability to make a go, no go kind of decision. Can I deliver enough for this organisation? Can I put my best foot forward? We're big fans of using information that we've already created. So it might be that you're reusing a previous bid, but the attention to detail to make sure that you're not referencing previous customers and that it is right and relevant for that opportunity is really crucial. And one of the jobs that we do in any bid is we try to back up what we're writing down, the claims that we make in when we're answering those quality questions, with evidence. So if we're going to say something like we are world leading at preventing modern slavery, the next question is how? How do we do that, and how can we evidence that? So if we're going to say we will do something, or we are doing something, or we are something, then try and evidence it. That lack of evidence will often mean lower scores. If there's information that you're asked for, we need to put that in, and if you've got questions around it, then do use the clarification process. But key information missing, you might get a clarification question once it's closed on it, but you may just be counted out as being non-compliant. So do make yourself aware of that key information. And there will often be a constraint on a quality question answer. So you might have a word count or a page count. Whatever the constraint is, it might be no graphics, no attachments, 500 words, etc., etc. If there's a page count, there's likely to be a font size that's stipulated. The advice is don't go over those things. Work within those constraints. If it's a 500 word constraint and you put 510 in, the last 10 words will simply be redacted and the evaluator won't see them. Same on a page count. If it says 4 pages and you put 5 in, then the last page will just not get to the evaluator. So there is very little point in going over any of the word or page counts. We've talked about assumptions. Don't assume that people know what an acronym means or jargon means, or a technical reference means. Don't assume that an evaluator knows anything. What an evaluator has to do is take the bid at face value. So what you write down, if you are successful, you'll be contractually obliged to deliver. So try not to make any assumptions of what people will take into account. And the final thing is selection questionnaire compliance. Do you have your policies, your processes, your insurances, your licenses, accreditations? Do you have your case studies? Do you have the financial records that will show your stability? Do you have references from other clients in this particular sector or any other that will help you get through selection questionnaire compliance? It's one of the reasons that we put the selection questionnaire in the public sector supplier ready accreditation, is to help people in slower time go through the selection questionnaire to make sure they've got everything that they need in place. And then one of the final things is what the public sector has to offer to help us as bidders and potential bidders to get engaged and to develop that relationship. So when we ran one of these sessions back in 2021 now, the head of procurement, the then head of procurement for Bradford City Council, came and said, actually, if you are going to send a cold email on LinkedIn or just via an email address or any sort of cold communication, make it as targeted as possible. So when we were talking about understanding the local area, understanding what that organisation really stands for, what they're trying to achieve, what that business has been putting out into social media, that can really help you formulate a targeted and relevant communication to the right person. And thinking about the right person is really helpful. If you've got membership to Chambers of Commerce, Federation of Small Businesses, or if you're part of any of the growth hubs that local authorities tend to run, then actually those organisations will help connect you to the right people as well. And of course, you can come to Go for Growth. And if we have contacts in a particular organisation, we'll definitely pass those on to help you make that targeted introduction. And we'll make introductions wherever possible as well. But the public sector does a number of things. So they have Meet the Buyer events. They already do, although it really dropped off a cliff in the pandemic for obvious reasons. They do a lot of pre-market engagement. And as I've said, the regulations is only serving to try and increase that, so that there is more early engagement with businesses, so that as an organisation, we can get prepared, but also so that we've got the opportunity to ask questions and help shape what is going out into the market. There are lots of place-based business events. So we've attended Leeds Business Week a number of times. There's in almost every local area, there'll be some sort of place-based business event that's going on, especially since the UK Shared Prosperity Fund was launched. There's lots of that engagement with the local business area to help build those relationships. Lots of the pre-event questions that we get is, how do I find a person to build a relationship with? All of these things that are on screen are a useful way of making contacts and using chamber membership, FSB membership, and Go for Growth to make those introductions where we can. There's also sectoral events, so Net Zero Week, Apprenticeship Week, Women's International Day. All of those things are generally celebrated by public sector organisations, and they can be, if you are passionate about those things, if you're active in those areas, so if you've got your carbon reduction plan and you are doing something great around reducing carbon, you can really use those sectoral events to create relationships, build relationships, and really put your business on the map in terms of, here's what we're doing, have a look at us. And then they're through portals, but we've talked about requests for information, the RFIs that come out. There will usually be a lag between a request for information coming out and that turning into a live opportunity. But if you've got the time and the resources, and if you're minded to, we would always recommend you get involved with an RFI if you can. If you see those opportunities on the portal, do try and get involved. It will give you some early signals of where the thought process is going for that organisation. But more than that, it gives you an opportunity to take part. And really, you know, with 5.5 million businesses in the UK, 99.3% of them are small businesses. The talent is in our marketplace. The voluntary sector is the, you know, the civic glue of our UK PLC. And so it's right and relevant that the public sector should be asking the provider marketplace where the talent is, where the knowledge is, where the innovation is for our opinions and information on stuff. So if they're asking for it, our advice would always be to try and get involved in that if you can. And then final thing before we open up for questions, how can we help in Go for Growth? So on the screen, you can see the first URL is for the Public Sector Supply Ready accreditation. You can click through there and work through the accreditation. If you need any help, give us a shout. The second is for the carbon reduction plan. So you can go through there and create your own carbon reduction plan. Go for Growth has one. It's not a lengthy process. It is fluid and flexible, and it's proportionate, which is important. If you want a one-to-one with either myself or Lauren or any of our team, you can book through our Go for Growth calendar. We do Teams one-to-ones. You can have as many of those as you like, as often as you like. You can book them directly into our calendar. And our video library and events are there as well. So we have got our next events coming up in March, the Lunch and Learns. So the first Lunch and Learn on the 6th of March is going through the standard selection questionnaire and breaking that down, the 7 sections. We've then got specification, evaluation criteria, and answering quality questions. Then we'll have a look at the legals, and then we'll have a look at feedback. So if you want to have a look at any of those, please feel free to join us for any or as many as you would like. And if you want to be kept up to date, you can do so through you can scan yourself there, or you can go to Go for Growth News. Generally speaking, what you'll hear from us is about opportunities in the public sector or events that we've got going on. We don't write a monthly newsletter just to tell you about our holidays or anything like that. We don't spam, and you can obviously opt out at any time. So if you would like to be kept up to date, please do feel free to sign up there. There'll be a link to it as well in the post-event survey. And that was a real whistle-stop tour around promoting your organisations. I will open up to questions. We have around 5 or 6 minutes left. I won't force us to stay here for that time if there aren't any questions. But Lauren, can I ask if there Is there anything in the chat or anything in Q&A that we should be looking at?
Yes. So there's one question that came in from Abby, and it was, what would you class as oversharing on social media, and how many times a week is appropriate to post on a social media platform?
Okay, so how many times? Let me take those two questions the other way around. So in Go for Growth, and I can't speak for Lauren, but I can speak for myself in that I'm no social media expert, and it's an area that we constantly have to make an effort on. We work with a freelance marketer, and she tells us that we should be posting little bits and often. So Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think if you're posting once a day, every day, that feels really good. But the thing to avoid is a plethora of posts and then a load of radio silence. And that is where Go for Growth needs to get better. We're still learning how to manage social media. So don't be boom or bust, steady and often, so that you don't bombard people, but you do get your name in front of them as often as possible. I think oversharing on social media will be super subjective. So but it will be things like, I think, complaining about a client or a supplier very verbally in public. I think in the public sector, one of the things that Go for Growth tries to take into account is being, I don't know what the term is, but as individuals, we'll have political views, but we try to steer clear of sharing those political views as an organisation, because we work across lots of local government organisations, and we could work across the whole of the public sector. So we might have a view on what is happening politically, but often it can be tricky to have those political opinions. And I'm not saying don't have them, I'm saying consider them, I think, in terms of the impact. And I think that's probably the general advice. Think about the consequence and impact and what you're trying to achieve with your social media posts. And it's okay to be challenging. It's definitely okay to be contentious. It's definitely okay to ask the tough questions out there on social media. But there are some things that might, even unintendedly, if that's the word, end up being a bit negative. One of the questions, Lauren, when I asked if people would benefit from a social media and marketing webinar, what was the response? Did we get lots of yeses to that?
All around yeses.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, it is an area that's definitely not in my toolkit of expertise, but we can bring in an expert to do that. So we'll definitely have a look at putting in over the next couple of months a webinar dedicated to how to use social media as a small business or voluntary sector organisation, and how to market a business, and with cost effectiveness in mind as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
We've had one more in as well, just regarding the bidding process. So is the bidding process fair if others are potentially using AI to write bids or answer questions?
Oh, it's such a good question. And it's really timely, actually. So Lauren and I have been talking about this a lot. I was talking about tech and AI at the London Anchor Institution Network conference last week. I talk about it to all of our customers. Is it fair? I think it's no less fair, I guess, than if you use a bid writer. So lots of organisations use external sources to support writing a bid. Is AI any different to using a bid writer? And there'll be lots of different answers to that. I think one of the things that the public sector has to accept is that ChatGPT, AI, Claude.ai, all of those platforms, and there are many, many of them, are there. Small businesses are resource constrained, and so they will be being used. And if they're not used well, you can sort of spot them a mile away, because everything is written in American spelling for a start, and it can often feel less personalized because the tech doesn't know you in the way that you know you. But I think it feels like it's another external source that is in the toolkit of people. The public sector, though, I think has to figure out for itself how to harness AI. I mean, we use AI extensively in all different mechanisms in our business, and it's a real time saver, but it comes with all the regular health warnings in the way that a bid writer may not write the best bid for you, neither might AI. So hopefully that answers the question. It's such a subjective and timely question. I'm not sure there's a hard and fast answer to it, but it's real and it's there, and people are using AI all the time.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning as well. It's like that contracts and authorities are learning at the same time as us with AI and receiving bids that they think could have been like AI generated, I guess. And I guess this leads into the next question that we've just had forward. So, is using AI acceptable and we won't get penalised?
And so actually, I'm not a contracting authority, so I can't answer that as a hard and fast yes or no. As a personal response, I would find it hard to see how you could be penalised, because you've got to run the AI, you've got to put the information in for AI to help you come back. It doesn't feel very different from using a bid writer, and bid writers, the whole industry of bid writers out there is using a tech to help you write a bid different from using a person to help you write a bid. I personally, I'm not sure I could see a real difference in that. So how could you be penalised for using AI if you can't be penalised for using a bid writing organisation? I think what you would have to be careful of is intellectual property and copyright in AI. So what you can't allow is the tech to regurgitate someone else's work, put that in a bid, and then inadvertently fall foul of IP or copyright legislation. So but you would still have to sense check that with a bid writer. So all the normal conditions and caveats, I think, apply in terms of whoever you're using externally to help you put a bid together. But I can't see how you could be specifically penalised for using AI unless you fell foul of something like copyright or plagiarism or intellectual property or anything like that. It will be interesting to see how this is tested over time, to be fair. We could probably do a whole webinar on AI in procurement. So I'm conscious that we are 2 minutes over. I know everyone's really busy. People have had to start to leave already, but thank you ever so much, everyone. If there are further questions or anybody wants to chat on any of the stuff that we've covered today, get in touch with either myself or Lauren. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and we'll get the information out to you as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.